The music manipulated me. I even got chills.
Your voice right there sounded like Nebuchadnezzar from VeggieTales.
Oh, really?
Have you ever listened to
the bunny.
Exactly.
I ate the bunny.
Sorry.
All right, we're going to eat some bunnies.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Anyways.
Okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
I can change my voice.
Right back to regular schedule programming. Sorry about that one. Welcome to TikTok Theology, a podcast that tackles the major trending topics on social media that concern the Christian faith. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steven. We know you can't form a theology in 3 minutes or less, but those videos can identify current issues. TikTok will give us the prompt, and then we'll do a deep dive. Thanks for joining us in this exploration.
Hi, friends. Welcome back for our final episode of season 2.
Last one.
Can you believe that we are already at episode 10?
I cannot believe that.
That went fast. I feel like it went faster than our first season.
Yeah, I feel like our first season we were stressing a lot more of like how to do a podcast.
Right now we're straight up comfortable. Now we're just in this.
Yeah.
Well, to round us out this season, we're going to be chatting about the question, can worship music manipulate? And we've seen this as a conversation on social media, as all things are that we chit chat about on TikTok Theology, but it also came from a friend of yours.
Yes, one of my former students who I call Zeus. So Zeus, if you're out there, this is for you, homie. But that brings up a great question. If you guys have topics y'all want us to talk about, please let us know. You can comment in Spotify. There's like a little thingy that says, what did you think about it? You can drop comments in YouTube, TikTok, wherever you find us. You can drop a comment and say, hey, I want y'all to talk about this. And
or if you know us personally, you can text, harass,
yep.
ambush us at LPU.
So, yeah, I actually get this all the time. You know, leading the worship arts and media program, I get this like literally all the time from students, from parents, from like all sorts of people.
Yeah.
But this is pretty big in social media too, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we all want to make sure, especially Gen Z, that things are authentic and that we're not being manipulated, taken advantage of, all that, especially in like a world of people have brand deals or people edit everything where it's like, okay, am I being manipulated? Like that's the question I think at every turn. And so when people are exploring their like in religion or spirituality, whether you're a Christian, non-Christian, like everyone I think likes to make sure that they're not being manipulated.
Yeah.
And so conversations, especially around things that can be very experience-based, like worship, you know, especially corporate, which would be in this setting, but even can be in like private worship, where it's like, is worship music manipulative? Like, is it intending to make me feel something either toward God or toward my situation or whatever that I wouldn't feel if I wasn't in this kind of space where this kind of music is being shared?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just been a question that's asked all the time where people will be like, I went to church and they'll share their experience and be like, oh, the music felt very, like it was creating an atmosphere and then it felt kind of manipulative or whatever. And so I think that that's something that people are concerned about and something that we get to address today. Yeah.
And I think there might be a general distrust with institutions and so people not trusting churches and what's going on there too. So I did a deep dive in this because I just wrote a chapter in an upcoming book called The Spirit and the Song, and it's co-edited by me and my friend Chris Green, who's a professor at Southeastern, and we have 15 different people writing in it and talking about music and worship and theology in different realms. Some friends are on it. Jen Thigpen actually has a chapter in it. So there's a lot of really, really, really good stuff. So look out for that. That hopefully is out by the end of this calendar year. But I wrote a chapter on music and manipulation just because it's such a huge topic. It gets asked so often. So I was like, you know what? Let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
As I was researching it, I was looking online, looking for different things, and I saw a bunch of YouTube stuff, YouTubers like with hundreds of thousands of views talking about the manipulation of worship and stuff like that. And there was one, his handle is called Faith Free. So he's like an atheist and like a former Christian that's talking about some of the stuff that happens in church. Yeah. And he wanted to discuss how church music directors, called like MDs, a music director, they utilize tactics to manipulate people through music. So like an MD is that guy on stage who's like talking in the mic and like
and no sound is coming out on our side.
Because he's basically talking to the band. He's like, all right, we're going to switch to the one here. Or like, all right, let's vamp a little bit. Let's hold this out. We're going to crash out here. Like he's basically talking through the band.
He's directing, you might say.
He's directing, So it's an important role. There are in other things too. It's not just in worship. You have people like doing that MDing. I guess this guy used to be an MD. And so he was basically talking about some of the things that the MDs would do and how it was used to manipulate people. And so he said, feelings the church tries to sell us as an evidence for God has a logical explanation. He says the skillful usage of formal music elements in a worship service, this is his quote, they start to blur the lines between feelings and spirituality, between performance and manipulation. Our entire goal is to make people feel like they're connecting with God, to trigger that big emotional response and spiritual high. And we know exactly what works. We're professionals. So that's his quote.
Yeah.
And so he basically says, the emotional journeys that people are supposed to go on, when they enter into worship, they're all planned out. The production seems larger than life. It's almost spiritual. Right? There's like fog machines, lasers and stuff.
Of
right?
course.
And the groups that are targeted by this are, and he says they're emotionally vulnerable, like children or like youth or youth groups or whatever, and people that have gone through difficult times. So that's why they're in church, they're looking for spiritual guidance. So he thinks that they're being duped into the faith through emotional manipulation.
Interesting.
So that's kind of like the big one, like him just kind of like throwing it out there. And I think he is mistaken on many, many levels.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to take a little like care to unweave this a little bit, this web. You know what I'm saying?
We are fully in a web at this moment.
We're in a web.
Yeah. And granted, I'm sure there's probably some experience on his end and then probably a lot of people's end where they have experienced some kind of emotional abuse or manipulation in their church contexts, that this does feel like, oh, well, then everything is like this.
Yeah. I think it's not that he's totally completely off base.
No.
But I just think he's telling you a very interpreted version of his experiences from his own lens and just kind of applying it to everybody, saying like, this is the scheme that everybody does.
Right. This can't be a blanket statement.
Yeah,
for sure.
It can't. And also when you mix truth with falsities, then it starts sounding like truth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the serpent did in the garden.
Right. Flat out lies nobody believes.
Right.
But truth with a little bit of a lie in there?
And so I'm not saying that he's necessarily trying to lie, but he is absolutely talking about it in a reductionistic way from his own experience and then applying it to everybody else. So it's filtered. It's understood in a different way. So I think there's a lot to, disentangle here.
Right.
So first off, I think we should define some terms.
Define the terms.
You know what I mean? Because I think people are talking past each other when they're talking about what is manipulation, what is this, what is that.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of like people are meaning different things and then just talking to each other and then not, like just yelling.
We tend to do that. Us as people tend to talk past each other quite a bit, huh?
And so, and I think this is happening here, even in just the way he framed everything.
Yeah.
So the term manipulation, first of all, that has to do with control generally, right?
Yeah.
But it can be easily equivocated. That means like, given multiple meanings or like mixed meanings, like you're using the word which with one connotation in a different sense where it shouldn't have that connotation. For instance, a potter might skillfully manipulate his or her clay, right? Like you might say that, but that is using manipulation as a skillful handling. So there is a fact of control involved, like they're controlling where it's going or whatever. But it's not how people typically talk about it, right?
No.
We typically think of manipulation as a form of social control, someone trying to control someone else's thoughts or behaviors.
Yeah. It's typically a negative connotation.
It's a negative connotation. And I think there's something even more there. It's not just social control. Because, for instance, if a parent tells a kid, you are not allowed to watch TV until you're done with your homework, they're controlling you. They're controlling the child, but that's not manipulation.
Right.
So it's not merely social control. There's something else. And I think the general way that we all talk about manipulation is social control with ill intent, with deception, with lies. Like that's what we mean when we talk about manipulation, right?
Yeah.
There's a psychologist named Stephen Brown. And he says there are two ways to understand the word. First, there's a broad view that basically says all communication is some sort of manipulation because it all leads to some sort of behavioral control. So like if we were at a dinner table and I was like, hey, can you pass the salt? I'm manipulating your actions or whatever. I'm controlling your actions by even that request or whatever. we don't, that is that way of thinking about manipulating clay or the parent. Like that's kind of that broad view.
Yeah.
Then there's the narrow view that says it's a specific form of communication that is used to intentionally influence someone's behavior through deception. So the sender, the person who is like sending the message, their intentions are selfish and concealed. They're hiding some kind of a motive, some ulterior motive from you. And they're trying to get you to act in a certain way that you think is for your benefit or something, but they're hiding something. That is what we think of when we say manipulation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so a sender might want an unfair advantage. They'll manipulate you to do something so that way if you guys are like competing against something, they'll have an unfair advantage. Or they might, want to influence someone's outlook for whatever personal gain or get you to do something that you don't want to do. And so there's manipulation in relationships and dating and stuff like that, getting the significant other to do stuff they don't want to do.
Yeah.
There's manipulation in money exchanges, in sports, and also there's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Everywhere, right? And so the way we're thinking about it is it's not just control, it's deceptive control, right?
Yeah.
Does that already change anything for you? Just like having that difference there of what we're talking about with manipulation?
I think that this kind of understanding of manipulation, one, would imply then that every form of worship trying to be manipulative does imply this
ill intent.
Yeah. That his kind of this statement from this YouTuber, right, saying that all worship is manipulative and understanding these terms is a blanket statement that anybody who's in forms of corporate worship in a church has the ill intention of changing or having a say in the behavior of the congregants.
Right.
Which I think makes even, because you can disagree with the statement from the beginning, like right off the bat, but to then understand like the implication that churchgoers and worship leaders are doing it to intentionally and with an ill intent persuade congregants every single Sunday, I think is a very extreme view.
Yeah, it's a reductionism. And so when you reduce something to a caricature of itself, where it's not like a nuanced version of it, it's called a reductionism. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
I think there's another question, because you even said the word persuasion. I think that can be disentangled too, because persuasion isn't always manipulative either.
No.
Right?
No.
So like if people are trying to influence another person, if a person tries to influence another person, that is persuasion, right?
Yeah.
Simple as that. We do that literally all the time. We try to persuade each other in all sorts of things.
All the time. I mean, even in college, I took like a speech and presentation class and we had to give like a persuasive speech about something, this, that, and the other thing. Like it's very, very regular.
It's not just like politicians. Like it's literally everyone all the time.
All the time.
In social media, people are literally called influencers. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to influence you.
They're trying to persuade you to buy a product or try something, or eat a certain meal or buy a ticket to something. Like life is about being persuaded to do things.
Even if you're being persuaded to buy something, that could not be manipulative. It could just be honest. Like if somebody came to your door and was like, I'm going to sell you this vacuum cleaner. And then they're like, you know what? I'm going to get a commission if I get this, but I truly do believe that this vacuum cleaner is a good deal if you're in need of one.
Yeah.
And this is why. Here are all the specs for it. They're not actually manipulating you. They're just telling you exactly what's going on.
Yeah. If they were taking money and they knew that the vacuum sucked and they were like, but I'm going to sucker you into buying it.
Then that would be manipulation.
That would be manipulation.
Right. Or if they know you don't have money and then they're trying to do that anyways and try to make you think your situation isn't that bad. You can actually buy this.
Or talk you into a payment plan or something else. Yeah.
Those are the things that can get manipulative.
Yes, absolutely.
But straight up persuasion is not.
No.
Basically, what that means is that there's an ethical responsibility that surrounds influence. Like we need to be honest in our influence. And when persuasion has ulterior motives, that can become manipulative.
Yeah.
I realized early on when I was a little guy, I realized how persuasive I was. I got low-key kind of scared. I remember I used to collect stuff like Pogs. Do you remember? Do you know anything about that? You don't know about Pogs?
No.
All my millennials out there, I wonder if any of y'all remember that junk. They're like, it's just like a little game, little round cardboard thingies, and then you have like a slammer thingy, and you hit it down, and then you flip them over. But they were also like collector's items.
And it was just called a Pog?
Yeah, P-O-G, Pogs. And it was like, I played that when I was like little, okay? Like 6, 7. I remember.
Oh, these?
Those guys, yeah. Perfect. She just put up a picture.
Yeah, I had to do research mid episode.
Yeah. And I just realized how persuasive I was and low-key manipulative in trying to get my friends to trade me their pogs that I wanted.
Oh, that was like me with silly bands.
Were you manipulative? Did you
that was my like equivalent of a pog.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, where you can talk people into giving you the one that's shaped like a, I don't know, a butterfly or something in exchange for the one that you don't want that's shaped like, I don't know, a popsicle.
Yeah.
And you're like, this one's actually cooler if you think about it.
Exactly.
If you really think about it.
But you're saying this kind of stuff, and like I realized how manipulative I was being.
That's so self-aware.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I'm never ever going to do that again. I'm going to speak the truth in any situation, always, forever. And I made a extreme, just conscious decision to be like extra honest.
That's great.
In any situation. And I always have, and that's gotten me into a bunch of trouble, you know what I'm saying? But it's also done, a
lot of good.
A lot of
I'm
good.
Sure,
and just, like if I am trying to convince someone, like my friends will tell you, like I'm persuasive as heck. Like that's absolutely true. But I also do believe what I'm saying. Like I'm not manipulating you.
Yeah.
And honesty has just been very, very important. Like another thing with Mila, my daughter, I made a conscious effort to never tell her things that weren't true.
Yeah.
Even if they were like white lies or whatever. Like, look, listeners, y'all don't have to do what I do here. But I told her Santa wasn't real from the jump. I said Tooth Fairy wasn't real. I said all this stuff wasn't real because two things. One, the world is so full of lies and people manipulating you and people telling you all these narratives and false narratives and stuff like that. It can get very, very confusing very quickly. Gen Z and she's Gen Alpha, they have to navigate through how to figure out what's true and what's not, in the million things that people are telling you.
Right.
I want her to know that her daddy doesn't lie to her.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be the case where it's like, oh, well, you told me Santa exists. And then when she's 6 or whatever, 7, like, oh, he doesn't exist. So what else did he, lie about or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't even want to have that conversation. So that's number one. I was like, I'm just going to tell her because it's also not important. That's the number 2 is like Christmas is about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I want her to know this. It's about the birth of Jesus.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know he was born actually probably in spring and stuff like that. I don't care.
We know. We know.
But we're celebrating the birth of Jesus, the incarnation.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do that too. So I'm not telling y'all what to do with y'all's kids.
This is not a parenting advice podcast.
Nope. But I felt very convicted to be overtly honest with Mila about everything. So that way, no matter what the situation is in her life, she knows that she can come to me and she will get the truth, at least according to me, to what I believe to be true. Right. So that she'll have some kind of a foundation there as she's navigating difficult, issues and stuff like that.
Right. It's a good differentiation between persuasion, which we all live in every day and operate in, versus manipulation.
That's another thing. So like, if you were talking about a church context, is the church trying to persuade you? 100%.
Yes.
They want you to love Jesus.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They want you to be drawn to the presence of God.
Yes.
It's a church. That's what they do.
If you're in a church,
what do you expect to happen?
What are you expecting?
Right?
Right.
So they are definitely persuading. But if they cross the lines of manipulating, that's the next question. And he is saying blanketly that they essentially always do.
Yeah.
Well, the truth is they're not.
No.
They usually don't. But there are those times that we do, and that's what we need to talk about.
Exactly.
But before we mention that, I think there's one more disentanglement that needs to happen too.
Okay.
And this is me speaking as an artist.
Yeah.
Because I feel like as an artiste, I think he did something a little whack here too. The word affect, like AFFECT, we pronounce it effect, but I'm going to say affect. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Effect is also EFFECT.
Yeah, different word.
The combo between the both of those continues to this day to mess me up over which I should use at what time.
There you go. Affect is being moved emotionally, and then it causes a change in someone or something, right? So when you're affected, you're like feeling it, right?
Yeah.
And so if you get chills or goose flesh, it's called goose flesh is the technical term, I think.
I'm a goosebump terminology user.
Goosebumps?
Goose flesh is so foul to me.
I think that's the actual literal term,
I'm
though.
sure it is.
Yeah.
And it's one of those like, ugh.
That's kind of gross. Yeah. Goose flesh.
Kind of crusty and gross. I'm going to go with goosebumps for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'd be calling it goosebumps or chills.
But glad to know that we know the goose flesh.
I might just start calling it goose flesh to students and stuff just to mess with them.
They will yell at you immediately.
I think I will do it. So it has been observed that chills or goosebumps, it's a common affective bodily response to dynamic changes or crescendos in music. So like
I get goosebumps at regular songs.
Yeah, but specifically crescendos. So like if a crescendo is when you get louder.
Thank you for the layperson.
Or if there's like a big dynamic shift or whatever. Yeah. So like you're going all soft and beautiful, and then it just kind of like, it goes like, it gets huge. Those kind of things, those big dynamic changes, they can affect you. Like, been a bunch of studies talking about how that happens.
Yeah.
This would only work in the broad sense of the term manipulation that talks about mere behavioral control.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. In other words, they're equivocating the term. When they're saying, oh, I'll manipulate it, and then they think it's the ethically bad one, they're not saying that. They're saying the broad one.
Yeah. Like, right? It's not probably, it didn't get written to rise at that point of the song with an ill intention.
Have some ulterior motive of some sort, right?
Right.
So music did affect the receiver, and the people do know what they're doing. Like, musicians know that. But you know why? Because that's literally what art does. This is what, like, it's so frustrating to me when anybody acts like this is like confusing or something. Like, art is supposed to move you.
Yeah.
It's literally the point of what we do as artists. We want people to be affected about something.
Yes.
Whatever it is. We want you to stop and think about, feel something, deal with something. That's what being an artist is, that's doing art well. Okay?
Yeah, that's not even just a music thing.
Right.
Like, I was at the Louvre in Paris and I like cried. I was like, I'm so overwhelmed by how much like incredible artwork is in this room.
The
and
visual art
is insane.
You ever got moved in a movie?
Yes.
They were definitely trying to make you moved in the movie. Like, they didn't.
And moved was I.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if you're not moved, then you think that the art is bad.
Yeah.
It's like, this doesn't mean anything. It's not affecting me at all, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. Knowing music is affective, listeners desire to be moved when they listen to music.
Yeah, like, why would I listen to music that just makes me sit there with a straight face and go,
I mean, we might, like, for example, like, if we're like doing homework or writing or something, and we put on some chill
like
background
lo-fi,
music,
coffee shop,
that kind of deal. Then we are not expecting the music to move us, right? Like, if we just want something chill in the background,
it's going to take up musical space in my brain so that I can focus on this other thing.
Right.
It's not being completely silent.
But if we're listening to our favorite band and doing anything like that, then we want to be moved, right?
Yes.
So, listeners, we yearn to be transported, to be inspired, to feel something. Mm-hmm. That's what we want, regardless of what genre you listen to. Like, I'm more of like heavy music, you know what I mean? Like punk and metal and alternative rock and stuff like that. And like, you want to be moved. You want to feel that.
Yeah.
You know, if it's aggressive, you want to feel that aggression. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what you want.
Absolutely.
And so your music speaks to you. It touches you. It resonates with you, right? Mm-hmm. And so if church musicians are good artists, then they're going to wield their craft well.
Right.
Like, I don't even know why that's a difficult concept for some people. Mm-hmm. It's like, you want this guitarist to be good at playing guitar, then he's going to try to shift and change with the dynamics of a song.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do as a musician.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The music isn't manipulative. People are.
Right.
And that's what you have to figure out. You need to know the intent. Is the person trying to use music to manipulate you?
Yeah.
Because the music is so effective.
Yeah.
Is the person using an effective medium on purpose in order to manipulate you? Mm-hmm. That's essentially what that guy is saying. Yeah. He's saying that all church music does that. They're using an effective medium in order to manipulate you. But then manipulate you to what? To worship God? You just went to a church, homeboy. Like, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think they're trying to do there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Bring in the throne room.
That's
why we're there.
What is the ulterior motive?
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. This can get to, I think, the question at hand. What would be a church's ulterior or hidden motive? You know, Christian worship music is performed in a context of religious persuasion. Mm-hmm. Churches want participants to connect with God, and they want people to grow in their devotion with God.
Right.
That's the theological belief of the church. What we think is happening is that the Holy Spirit is already present. So the role of the worshiper is to turn our hearts and minds towards God who's already there.
Yeah.
That's what we believe is happening. God is already there. And so music will help us align and recognize.
Music didn't usher God in.
No. God's already there.
He was like, oh, thank goodness. Now that the keys are there, I can finally enter the room.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I've been waiting for this one.
No, the Spirit, the Spirit is ever present, imminent, and with us.
Yes.
So often we are scatterbrained and not focused, right? And so what music is supposed to do, what we believe music is doing, is it's helping us aesthetically focus on God so that we're moving our heart and our mind towards God.
Yeah.
It's used as a tool for the worshiper to become sensitive to the presence of the Spirit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it opens us up to be receptive to an encounter with God. Mm-hmm. That is what Christians truly believe. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they believe is happening.
Yeah.
How is that an ulterior intent? That's the question. If you go to the church and they're saying, hey, everybody just close your eyes. We're gonna focus on Jesus's face right now. Just imagine Jesus right there in front of you. Or like, do you feel the Spirit? Do you feel that? They're not manipulating. They believe that's happening.
Yeah.
That's the theological crux of what they think is going on. Yeah. Maybe the dude was a hidden atheist and he was playing music to do that, but like that's what Christian that's what you believe is happening, right?
Yeah,
that's what I believe is happening.
100%.
That's what you ask any Christian. That's what they believe is happening.
Yeah,
you know, that is not an ulterior motive. That's not manipulation.
Right.
So many of the suspicions surrounding Christian worship music have to do with receivers, the person coming in, questioning the intentions of the leaders of the institution that present the music. Yeah. And so they're asking, like, why are we being persuaded with music? Music is persuasive. Why are we being persuaded with this? Is it only to connect with God, or is the church hiding another social or political motive?
Yeah.
So that is the real question, because that can be the case.
Yes.
Right?
And we've seen it.
We've seen it.
I actually was at a camp one time, and there was this like really like deep, meaningful like worship session. Like everyone was crying. You know how camp is, right? People are crying. People are receiving the Holy Spirit, all the things. It's so incredible, all yada, yada, yada. And then the director of the camp came up like in the middle of that and essentially asked this like junior high, like this is a kids camp. Like these are kids. Yeah. Like however old you can go to camp. I want to say it's like 6 to 12 or something like that. So this is like standard, like small child camp, right?
Yeah.
And the director of the camp comes up and immediately, like in this like really spiritual moment, asks these kids to give money towards this cause. And it really, really rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like sure. In that space. 'Cause it's different to me when someone's like the announcement person during service and comes up and is like, hey guys, this is the power of giving and this is why we give of our tithes and offerings. Like that's a whole separate thing. But it was like 3 songs deep, like people are weeping, like
and they're kids.
And they're kids and they're experiencing an encounter with the Lord, probably for a lot of them for the first time in their whole life.
Yeah.
And they're kids and they've been sent up with like $20 from their parents. Like they don't have Apple Pay. Like nobody's copping the credit card information. Like these kids were given like snack shop money at 7, 8 years old. And to go up to me and to use a space that was like worship saturated, like everyone is very like emotionally open right now, spiritually open, and then to be asked to give money toward a cause, and then I felt the way that it was delivered was very manipulative as well. And so I think for me that was the only moment that I've personally had where I felt like the worship space was being used manipulatively to make a group that probably shouldn't be responsible to give any money towards a cause that this person was
and so there
wanting.
you gotta ask, to what extent was that camp director or whatever manipulative? Like maybe they were trying to instill the biblical principles of tithing.
But it wasn't a tithing thing, you know, because these are kids and they're asking to give toward a cause.
It seems wrong. But like the point of intent may not have been bad. Like he might not have had a bad intent.
I'm sure it wasn't bad.
But I think it
felt icky though.
And that shows you there is an extra level of responsibility that we have to have when we're dealing with children.
Yeah.
Because they are still forming. They're still like learning how the whole world works and stuff like that. And we always do, but like there's a certain innocence with children that like a grown adult can easily manipulate, right? And you protect them. You protect them from sorts of stuff like that. So maybe the best case scenario, that camp director was not having bad intent, but that's still unwise, extremely unwise.
Yeah. And it's one of those that like, if that's your experience in church, like over and over and over again, like you kind of understand how someone gets to this like faith-free mindset where it's like, oh, everything is just because you want something from me. And you're like, oh, you're swindling a bunch of kids out of money. Even though like I'm sure the intention was to give towards this worthy cause. It's the way that it's done. That's kind of like,
yeah, it doesn't seem right.
But that was just like that was probably the personal experience, but we've seen others.
There's some super high profile ones. You know, Hillsong has had some major struggles recently.
Yeah.
They've had some scandals and there's been numerous reporters and documentarians questioning Hillsong's power and organizational structures in general. Some of them bother me. Like there was this one I remember I was watching. And so don't get me wrong, Hillsong definitely did some bad stuff.
100%. We've seen the bad stuff.
The New York pastor was in sexual sin, leadership sins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The main pastor, also of Hillsong. There's a bunch of stuff that they did, but like I remember watching one of the documentaries, and it was so slanted, and I thought it was so unfair. Everybody had an agenda, and when you're doing a documentary, you're supposed to like present the facts.
Be somewhat unbiased.
Jeez, it was not. And so like I remember one guy said this. He's like, Hillsong, everything they do was for one reason: to get as much money as they can out of you.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, how the heck do you know this? You random dude that's like
random
just
guy
saying
who was
stuff.
not involved in that at all.
Yeah. So there is that. And then 2, there's hundreds of thousands of people involved like in Hillsong churches. Yep. Like to just say that blanketly like that is just utterly absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do that for any situation, for anybody. You can't totally generalize, for like an entire people group. There's a fallacy. It's called a hasty generalization that's going on there. So it's just, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a discount of the Hillsong churches or any church that's operating healthily and well.
Yes.
Where now they're going to be grouped in with this blanket statement that's made very publicly.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of really fantastic leaders in that movement and pastors and all of these people that will get lumped into that kind of overgeneralization.
And that's like saying like all atheists do this and then just like lumping them into that. It's like you just can't generalize on people.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be whack people in any given situation.
Yeah, well, even us as Pentecostals, we would hate if someone was like, "Oh, all Pentecostals are weird," and they
and
jump up and down and
they
make animal noises or whatever when they're worshiping.
And just because that's true of me and you doesn't mean it's true for all Pentecostals.
Exactly. Right. Not everyone barks like a dog.
Just us.
Just us.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't generalize.
Yeah.
You can call out there's an issue. Hey, there's an issue within your tradition.
Right.
They work on it, and then if they're not working on it in a forthright way, you can call that out too.
Exactly.
And so, but that's one of them. One of them that I felt was way more problematic, that I just thought was entirely manipulative, was during 2020, during COVID. There was these worship protests, and they were so stinking politicized.
That was awful.
It was ridiculous.
The Jesus Christ super spreader shirt that they were selling.
Yeah, Jesus is a super spreader.
Yep.
And one of the biggest culprit for this was a guy named Feucht, and he still is like crazy politicized. Man, that's so bothersome.
It rubbed me all kinds of the wrong way.
Because it was wrong. Like your worship protests are damaging because they make musical worship into a political tool. Rather than a means to connecting with God, right?
Oh, Jesus would have... he would have had a fit.
They're mixing it together.
Fit.
So they're like, oh yeah, we're worshiping God and you're all good and stuff like that. People will feel conflicted about their faith because they are pressured to conform to a certain political view in order to attend these worship gatherings.
Right.
You know what I mean? To worship God, you have to have a certain view on masks. That's kind of where it was.
That's exactly what it was.
You have to be an anti-masker to worship God.
You have to be anti-vaccine. You have to not believe COVID's real. You have to not wear a mask.
All
and
that
that's
junk.
how you can be a qualified Christian to show up to these events.
And here's the thing. A person can completely hold those political views. That's totally fine. You're an American citizen.
You're allowed
can
to do
hold
that.
those views. That is fine. Don't talk to me about those views either way. None of that junk in the context of worship.
Never.
Because when you're doing that,
please.
you are mixing the gospel with your own political leanings.
Yeah.
And that's what was going on there. That's syncretism. We're political in the sense of like, extending the kingdom of God in all areas of the world.
Right. When it's used as a political tool for the king, as we say, for Babylon.
Not for Babylon.
No.
Yeah, no. You don't.
No.
You don't use worship to extend the Republican or the Democrat Party. If you start thinking that way, you are just flat out wrong.
Agreed.
People are conflicted. They're feeling a certain way because they want to worship. They want to do these songs.
Yeah.
And then they're feeling that you have to do this one political thing or whatever.
Yeah. And especially in a place where everyone was worshiping online because of the lockdowns and stuff, you felt almost like you were like, if you miss corporate worship, like you almost feel, like you said, like pressured to hold a certain political view to attend because you're like, I do miss corporate worship, and if this is the only way that I get to do that, maybe this is what I have to do.
Now here's the thing, we do need to give some grace because that was a difficult time. Like we had so many more questions than we had answers. We didn't totally know what to do. But just flat out, those worship protests, that is a slippage between your liberal sense of freedom, classical liberalism, and thinking that we have these God-given rights to not have blah, 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 blah. That is absolutely nowhere in the Bible. Yeah. I'm writing a book on it. Like, we have a sense of covenantal freedom, that you're free in covenant with God.
Right.
That is what it is. And so when you did that stuff, it was hardcore syncretized, and we'll give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were trying to do the best that they can do. But let me just tell you, unequivocally, without confusion here, that junk was wrong.
Yes.
So when we're moved in a church, we can't think that it is automatically manipulation. Can it be?
Yeah.
Like in those worship protests or like the camp thing that you were talking about, like, yeah, we just need to have like a sense of what's going on ethically, but we should do that in all things. Like children can get manipulated in all sorts of places all the time, right? They can get manipulated by TV, by like YouTube channels,
literally
other influencers, by all the times. And so we need to always think about what is the, ethical motivation of what's going on. And so I guess the whole point of what we're saying here is being moved in a church is not manipulation by itself.
Right.
You can't just assume because you're moved out of church, you're manipulated. No, you're just moved out of church. And it's somebody doing their art well, people just saying, hey, we're going to be drawn to the presence of God because that's what churches do. We come together to worship, right? And so you have to understand that. Churches purposefully utilize music effectively at a service to encourage our receptivity to spiritual encounter. We have agency, and so an openness to God is essential for encountering God.
Yeah.
We want to be open. A lot of times, I think what happens is a person does not want to lose control of themselves in any way. So if they're feeling something that they weren't expecting, they don't like it because they're not in control of the situation.
Yeah.
That might be part of what's going on. They want to be rationally in charge. And I definitely was getting that vibe from Faith Free and from some of those atheists that say things. They want to be in control of whatever they feel in any given situation. When the fact is, we're being affected all the time,
right,
by commercials, by the world, by materialism, by whatever things. Like there's things that are affecting us all the time, good and bad. And so we need to navigate these things and understand that.
Right.
And so they don't want to open themselves up to encounter, because if they do so, then they're given something else the ability to affect them. And they don't want that.
Yep.
That's like, like going to a scary movie and then being like, this is all fake the entire time. So that way you don't get scared.
Yeah.
Didn't you just miss the point of going to a scary movie? Like you should
like
go
most people go to be scared.
Yeah. Like you're opening yourself up to be scared, even though you know it's a movie, right? That's kind of like this weird prioritization of the rational self over the emotional self, over the felt experience that we have.
Yeah.
In worship, we worship God in spirit and in truth. Yeah. So there's this both. There's this rational and there's this like felt reality, this experiential reality. And so as an effective medium, music is going to help us set the stage for a non-rational encounter with God.
Yeah.
And ultimately what Christians believe and what most religious traditions believe is that then you're engaging your whole self, a holistic self, right? You're not just your mind, your mind and your body, your experience there, your all that kind of stuff's happening, right?
Well, yeah, even like music being used in stuff like music therapy is huge. Like people respond to music. It's how we're built. Like people respond to music. There's an openness. Like that's why stuff like music therapy works, because there's a way that it engages us that's so different than like any other form of art in that way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Christians using that kind of medium to communicate something. And I would argue that being a Christian is to sacrifice and to be submitted to the Lord. So that's not even manipulative. Like they straight out the bat are like, yeah,
they tell you that
we don't control, like it's not my life. Like I'm follower of Jesus. Like I live in submission and sacrifice to the Lord, and that goes alongside.
All religions do that.
Exactly. So it's not manipulative to try and get you to give up control. We tell you straight up.
I'll
tell you right off the bat that you're giving up control. Like to be a Christian is to give up control.
And
I'm not manipulating you to give it up. I'm straight up telling you, and then creating a space in which you can do that.
We say the premise of it is, obviously there's the story of Jesus on the cross. He died for our sins. There's the gospel message. But all of that happened so that way we would be disciples. And what is a disciple? It's making God Lord.
Yeah.
Like is he Lord of your life? Then that means he's in control of what's going on.
Exactly.
And you're not.
And
so that's just what it means to be a Christian.
Right.
And we say that straight up. And like if a Christian doesn't say that, then they're selling you something different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Then we've got a separate issue.
Then there's another issue
encounter there.
Yeah. So the problem with Faith Free and what he's saying, there's several problems. I think a lot of them are based on equivocations. But one thing is his view assumes that there is no spiritual reality. And so that music's affect is utilized to make people believe something that's not true.
That's a good point.
So that's why he thinks it's manipulating, right? But he's making an atheist assumption.
Right. Like, we believe that the spiritual is always there.
We believe it's there.
It is there.
So we make a theistic assumption.
Yeah. We're not creating a spirituality out of worship.
Yeah.
We're engaging with a spirituality that already is there, that exists on its own.
So you see how he's talking past. So like he's assuming an atheist framework for the world.
Right.
And he's saying these religious people, they're making it up and then they're manipulating you to believe that. No, we believe that. We hold to this. We believe that God is actually in control.
Exactly.
We've experienced God ourselves. Like, we believe that what we experienced was God. And so when we invite you to that experience, we're not manipulating you. We're speaking from our truth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so he's already making that atheist assumption. That's the biggest deal right there. That's what he did right there. That's a
great point.
Yeah. Although abuses are possible, music is not generally utilized by the church in manipulative ways for at least 3 reasons. One, and I wrote this down in my chapter, so I'm just sharing it with you.
You said, so here's your little sneak peek.
People who enter a church setting know the church adheres to a theological framework of openness towards spiritual encounter. They literally believe that.
Yes.
Right?
Going into a church and then being shocked when people want to facilitate a spiritual encounter is a little wild.
That's crazy. 2, people who enter a church know that every element of worship is designed to help people encounter God through worship.
Right.
That's the whole point of why they're doing it, or else they wouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. They'd be doing something else to help you encounter God, right?
Yes.
And then number 3, people who enter a church know that the majority of the people present already subscribe to the church's theological framework of spiritual openness. It's a church community. Yeah. They hold this. So if you're coming in and you're thinking that everybody just kind of like had a pre-meeting, all right, we're getting together. We're going to use our music real good so that way we can manipulate all them atheists that come to the door, okay? It's going to be awesome. We're going to make them believe in this God that we're making up. Like, what are they thinking?
Evil laugh.
Like, what do they think is happening? That's so goofy. That framework, right?
I like to think of all the MDs
man
are in the ear going, oh, we got him now.
We got him.
You
Look at that. That one's crying.
That
what
one's
a
crying.
fool.
What an idiot. I absolutely got him.
Gosh.
You hear that? him plucking the strings. Yeah, evil laugh.
It's such a goofy way to think about stuff. And so, look, you're not duping anyone into faith through emotional manipulation.
No.
They're just trying to play music good. Come on, man. Come on.
Into genuine relationship with Jesus. No one got tricked into that.
No.
I promise.
You might have got tricked into something else.
But
that's not, when you experience Jesus, he's gonna say what's up.
That's his own thing.
So some people might retort that they're being misled by the experience itself, whatever the intention is. Like the experience is this affective thing. But then we got to ask, what are you being misled towards? Right? Like being misled means you're being led somewhere else. Right? Mm-hmm. That's what misled means. Right? So where are you being led to by the experience itself?
Which I guess if he's coming from an atheist perspective, then he believes that there is no God. So he's being misled to believe that there is?
Right.
Is that his...
That's what he's saying.
Seems to be the argument. Okay.
Right. Exactly. But he's coming from that framework.
Right.
And so the experience itself isn't leading you anywhere that you're not expecting. They're telling you it's leading you towards God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the expectation. So while the guide promised to bring you somewhere, they brought you elsewhere. That would be manipulation, right?
Yes.
That would be like, hey, we're going to worship God. We're going to lift him up. And by the end of this, you're going to not wear masks anymore, right? And so that's you're being led somewhere else.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the church is forthright about their intention and their usage of their effective mediums, then their experience that they foster will not be misleading. So the assumption he's making is that when it is difficult to make a rational argument for a belief in a faith, worship leaders rely on using emotion to convince others of the case. They'll be like, okay, when you can't, rationally tell me why I should be a Christian. Which
you would argue that during church, that's the pastor's sermon's job, right?
Well, not entirely, because they're not doing just straight up apologetics.
Well, yeah.
Like they could just be giving you encouragement or whatever. Their job is really to connect the heart and the mind and to move you towards action, Christian action, right?
So then it's interesting to me that he would say that churches are trying to do that in worship, because
Right.
I'm like, well, that's technically not really the space where you're asking the hard questions. I guess.
Who's going to do that? Like, homeboy, listen to TikTok theology. You know what I mean? We'll deal with those hard questions. You know what I'm saying?
I know a lot of people who wrote a lot of great books, have a lot of good podcasts.
Yeah, you're not going to get that
excellent articles.
Like, what kind of a worship song is going to be like that? Let's talk about the problem of evil, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, like, this
song is called Apologetics.
right? That's just not where it goes, right? And so, like, there's another YouTuber that asked this, and he said, quote, "If experiences of God's presence are real, they shouldn't require emotive ritual and music to occur. If the gospel is intentionally convincing, people shouldn't be emotionally primed before hearing it." So the problem with his quote is that he is not looking at people as holistic. He's thinking of people as brains.
Yeah.
The people are brains, bodies, emotions, we're all that, right? And so engaging fully as a human is important. Obviously, we want the sermon to be right and speaking truth and to be logically sound and stuff like that. But then music as an effective medium, we want the lyrics to ring true also.
Yes.
But like, they're also going to come from a theological framework, and they're going to speak towards a thing that is not necessarily trying to persuade you in the song, but is like moving you towards an assumed sense that God exists and is real, and we want to be brought into his presence.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting to say that, like, if experience of God's presence are real, they shouldn't require emotive ritual. I encounter God all the time without having a pre-encounter worship set.
Yeah.
Like, there are moments where I've experienced God that there's been no worship present.
Yeah.
Like, so I do encounter God intellectually in a lot of ways, and I do encounter God in a very different space.
Emotionally and bodily.
Yeah,
and
like that
everything.
doesn't, I don't require music or worship before any encounter with God. That's not a prerequisite. So I think that's interesting that this kind of quote in this statement almost implies that this worship is a prereq to encountering the Lord.
Well, it's fundamentally a dualistic sense of human constitution. It's Cartesian, like Descartes. It's assuming humans are brains and vats, like that's all that humans are. But the truth is, worshiping God fully entails worshiping God bodily and emotionally as well.
It's great.
It entails utilizing our greatest human expressions, the arts, in ways that glorify God and help people draw into God's presence.
Yeah.
That's the framework Christians come from. That is not manipulative. Dudes just got to listen to some William Lane Craig or something like that. You know what I'm saying? get some apologetics going or something, you know?
Listen to your worship music, and then we'll give you some good books to read on your apologetics.
And it's important to ask those deep, hard questions. And I think it's important, but.
And it's okay to ask if you are being manipulated. That is okay to ask. And be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What if I'm being manipulated?
Because
that's okay to ask that question.
Happen. It does happen.
It's better to be inquisitive and to figure it out than it is to just kind of blindly go along with everything, and then you've been manipulated and you're like, oh no, like it's okay to ask.
But the problem here is he didn't just ask; he came with an answer, and his answer already his answer assumed atheism.
Yes.
And his answer came from a framework where he's equivocating what it even means to be manipulation. And it was just like solidly wrong philosophically in a lot of ways, you know, reductionistic and all sorts of stuff. And so that's the issue. Now, should you ask those hard questions? Yep. Go listen to them podcasts and read them books. We got them in our show notes. We
asked the hard question. It's why we're here today.
Literally, we ask them and we explore them. That's what we do. And this is one of those hard questions. It truly is. And it does need exploration. It's just his answer is wrong. So
in conclusion.
In conclusion, and we just highlighted a whole bunch of reasons why.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's always a conversation. So if you guys want to keep that conversation going, tell us what you want to hear. What kind of topics you want us to hit in season 3, because this is the end of season 2.
This season, this episode, all the things are once again sponsored by the School of Theology and Ministry at Life Pacific University.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.